Kindo Zhu, Senior Fellow at Pan-Goal Institution, is joining us now from Beijing. Mr. Zhu, welcome to the program. Please give us your perspective on this visit by the Chinese Special Envoy of Eurasian Affairs to Ukraine.
Well, this is the most, let's say, high-profile efforts by a big power trying to bring an end to the ongoing conflicts, to save lives, to say the least. But of course, at the same time, people understand it is very difficult given the complexity of the situation and different expectations from the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and also the expectation of the European countries and the US. For example, the West basically demanding that Russia withdraw from the occupied regions in the eastern part of Ukraine and basically withdraw its military from the Ukrainian territory. A few people would expect the Russian side would do that at all. To be realistic, it's not about anything wrong or right. It's really about being realistic. So it will take some time. I expect there will be a lot of talk, shuttle diplomacy from one capital to another capital between officials. And also it has a lot to do with the situation on the battlefields. Many people, so far, I don't think the West is ready to negotiate a peace deal or a ceasefire with Russia at all. Because for Washington, which is waiting the so-called spring offensive from Ukraine, if Ukraine is successful in driving the Russian forces out of its territory, and they think probably that's a time to start a negotiation. But of course, there's a possibility of of Russian victory even over Ukrainian forces. That would be a different picture, a different outcome. We don't know yet, but the Europeans are also thinking differently from Washington. They are trying to prepare their own plan to solve this problem. So it's complex and will take time.
Mr. Zhu, before we leave you, how much weight do you think China has at the moment to be able to steer the situation between Ukraine and Russia to probably a ceasefire, probably get them to sit down for talks at the negotiating table to put an end to this conflict?
It's a good question. On one hand, I would say China is basically the only big power that remains, keeps a stable and a friendly relationship with both sides. We know there's a strong relationship between Moscow and Beijing, and there's a high level of political trust in each other. And I think Beijing and better probably about the expectation out of Moscow. At the same time, China enjoys a rather stable relationship with Ukraine, despite all the pressure from the West over the Ukrainian crisis. So China is probably the only major power well positioned to bring the parties to a ceasefire or to the negotiation table, to end the conflicts through dialogues instead of, finding a result or an outcome in the battlefields. Given, with that being said, at the same time, we need to understand that, as I said, it's very complex right now. It's also heavily influenced by the, say, weapon supply from the West, from the US, from European countries to Ukraine. And also inside Ukraine, there's a, I would say, strong consensus from the government to the people that they need to gain a complete victory over Russia before there's any type of negotiation. That's understandable, but at the same time, remember, if people are, let's say, refuse to be realistic, probably it's very difficult to engage in negotiation. So it has a lot to do with what's going on the battlefields. If Ukraine, for some reason, for example, they lose in their spring offensive, and the Russians will gain more territory in the east of the country. And at that point, probably Ukrainians will be more realistic and trying to solve the problem through negotiation. We don't know, but in any sense, it has a lot to do with Washington's support. It has a lot to do with the support from Brussels, and we will see whether those support will wane as time goes on. For example, if there's a different president in Washington, for example, Donald Trump, or Republicans winning more seats in the House, that could change the picture because dwindling support to Ukraine will ultimately decide the activities of the Ukrainians.
Thanks a lot, Senior Fellow at Pango Institution, Kindo Zhu, joining us from Beijing.